hip-hop soul in the crowd. Yeah.
All right, everybody, it's that time of year. It's a holiday. It's a holiday in this household because we get the man, the myth, the legend on the air. Of course, I'm talking about our friend, our guy, our godfather of college football, Mr. Phil Steele. Sir, always a pleasure having you on.
Hey, Stu, it's always good talking to you, my friend.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, man, this year has been interesting for college football. How are you guys in the headquarters in the Thunderdome out in lovely Cleveland outskirts? How are you guys handling it? Because again, another magazine available at Barnes and Noble's, successful launch, but I mean, with the transfers and the changes, I mean, you probably have transfers the day you go to print.
Yeah, it was what we had to do, Stu, is maybe 10 years ago, I could go to the press in May and be pretty confident of my rosters and 2 deeps and 3 deeps that we put in the magazine. And so we go to the press in May, come out maybe the start of June and get the magazine out there for sales. But this year, we went to the press June 7th, which means we didn't hit Barnes & Noble until July 4th this year. But it was well worth the wait because what happened was the transfer portal closed on May 15th. We weren't going to go to the press on May 15th without finding where all those players landed. So we gave it 3 full weeks. And I talked to 123 of the 133 head coaches this year. They all have my cell phone. And I said, look, I don't care if it's June 6th. If you land somebody, text me, call me. I want to get them on the page. And so there was June 6th, day before we go to the press. I'm getting texts, calls. We are dropping them into 3 deeps. We're rewriting positions. It's very frantic down the stretch. However, I feel we captured about 95% of the transfers that happened during the off season. So going to the press later, put our magazine to the press about a month after the other ones came out, but I think it definitely gave us the almost all of the players are on the right page for the right teams.
And I gotta say, I know it's a work in progress, but one of the nice things, I'm one of the smart ones, Phil. You know me. I get and my compatriot who's off at work, not as smart as me, but he even still he gets it. We go to philsteele.com, we pre-order, we get the VIP plus, and what's nice is you can go on there right now. Worth its weight in gold. The FCS preview. I'm deep into the weeds on Weber State. It's real sick over here. Some really sick things happening. But I love it. It's amazing. philsteele.com. If folks want to get the FCS magazine, I know you guys are still updating it, yeah?
Yeah, it's almost fully up there right now. But yeah, if anything happens, we will update it. And the great thing about the FCS, Stu, I don't know how many of your listeners actually gamble, but if you do, there's so much more value gambling on FCS football because nobody knows anything about FCS. There's all kinds of line value, and yet if you get the digital magazine, you get 2 full pages. And I've done FCS magazines before, maybe 1 page, but we give you 2 full pages, last 5 years spread history, everything that's in the regular magazine for the FCS, we give you on the FCS. You become an instant expert. So as opposed to the Alabama-Georgia game on the weekend, which everybody knows everything about and the line's super sharp, you could find some games where the line's maybe 5-6 points off where it should be just by reading the magazine and becoming an FCS expert.
And thank God for the Fordham Rams last year. That was a lifesaver. But yeah, no, that it's been an invaluable tool, and highly urge everybody listening to head over to philsteele.com. Check that out. It's worth its weight in gold. Trust me. Big Ten Conference, Phil. I mean, this is your bread and butter. This is home base for you. I'd like to pick your brain today, and we'll start in the West. The West, historically, the past few years has just been an absolute catastrophe when they get to the Big Ten championship game. But we've seen a ton of new infusion with Matt Rule and Luke Fickell coming over. We've seen a lot of interesting transfers, like Hudson Card showing up at Purdue, Luke Altmaier coming to Illinois. A lot of interesting things happening in the West this year. I wanted to first, we'll start with Northwestern and Purdue at the bottom. Is there any hope for these guys to contend in the West, even because it seems like it's going to be a lot more difficult than in past years?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, Stu, I thought last year the top team in the Big Ten West was actually Illinois. And it showed in the Big Ten title game what Michigan did to Purdue. I don't think they would have done that to Illinois.
Yeah.
It was a little bit of a collapse late in the season, unfortunately for Illinois. But, when you look at Purdue, they've got a first-year head coach, a lot of transition on the roster. And I think that is going to have an impact this year. They go from an offensive head coach to a defensive head coach. They have sold 39,000 season tickets this year, which is the most since 2008. You talked about Hudson Card coming in at QB, but it's a lot of transfer heavy. And unfortunately, last year, I looked at the schedule, and Purdue had a very favorable schedule last year. They didn't play any of the big boys. Well, guess what? This year, both Ohio State and Michigan drop on the schedule, two teams they avoided last year. So tougher schedule. Less experienced team. They're only number 112 on my experience chart. I do not have them there. And naturally, with what's happened at Northwestern, I don't give them a chance at all of getting to the Big Ten title game this year. Brand new head coach. They only had 95 players in August when you can have 110. And when they have a coaching change like that, you can leave. They lost Jeremiah Lewis, their safety. They lost a backup left tackle. A couple of players left the team because they're allowed to leave with the transfer change. So I think Northwestern, it's definitely going to be a tough year for the Wildcats. Had I known Pat Fitzgerald wasn't there, I would have picked them dead seventh in the West. As it was, I picked them tied for sixth with Purdue. But should be a long year for Northwestern. Ironically, Stu, on the digital version of the magazine, which as a VIP member you get for free, the digital version updates all the way through September. So we already have David Braun as the head coach of Northwestern on that page, and any other players that are in or out for the season.
In regards to Northwestern, it's a sad story. I'm a Pat Fitzgerald guy. I think you're a Pat Fitzgerald guy.
Yes.
In terms of quality coach. He was building something there and got them to respectability. I personally don't know if they win a game. I don't. Howard, again, reading the team preview, I don't know. That's not a cinch game for Northwestern.
I love how you're boning up on the FCS, Stu. That shows the quality of the work that you do.
I'm talking to somebody currently, Phil. I'm really sick in the head, but yeah, you made me this way. It's your fault.
You know what? I'm not going to apologize.
The rest of the West, like we kind of said, I mean, it's gotten a lot. The water's gotten deeper, and there's a lot more talent. Where you would kind of have to project teams in the past few years to, well, they need this to go right. And now it's kind of like it feels in reading the team previews, if this goes right, this could, lead to a 7, 8, 9 win season. For the West, what do you think the most probable outcome come end of the season, December 1st is?
I think the two best teams in the West this year are Wisconsin and Iowa. Now, the other three teams, Nebraska, I think Matt Rule is going to step in. They made my most improved list. And as you know, if you make my most improved list, that means I think you go from a losing season to a bowl game. I do think Nebraska gets to a bowl game, but are they ready to contend for the West? I say not. They're not quite there. Minnesota, sort of like Purdue. Their schedule was reasonable last year. Now both Michigan and Ohio State plop on the schedule. If you count those two as losses, then they've got to go at Iowa. They got to play at Purdue. So it's a tough schedule for Minnesota, a tougher schedule than last year. Number 7 toughest in the country. And then Illinois, while they've got some key players back, like on the defensive line, they've got Newton and Randolph back, both potential high draft picks. On the offensive line, they've got Adams and Pearl back, both high NFL draft picks. I really like Isaiah Williams. They bring in Altmaier, quarterback, but they do lose Chase Brown. They do lose a very good quarterback in Tommy DeVito, and they lose some key players off that defense as well, including a number 1, a number 2, and a number 3 draft pick. I'm not sure if they're quite up to the level of last year. They'll be very strong, but I put those three in a little bit of a group in the middle. And then at the top of the West this year, I'm going to go with Wisconsin and Iowa. And, It's interesting, Stu. I write the magazine in three different parts. The first part is a postseason right through, where I read everything that was written about the team during the season. I've just watched every game. I got 12 TVs in front of me, but I like to just concentrate on one team as opposed to trying to keep up with 133. And when I did that originally with Wisconsin, I wasn't wild about it because of the change of the offense. Phil Longo's coming in, and I got concerned.
Huge.
Abandon the run game with Braylon Allen and Chez Meluzzi. What are you doing? But the third right through of the magazine is after I talked to the head coach. And after talking to Coach Fickle, he assured me they are not abandoning the run game. In fact, if you go back and look, Wisconsin hasn't even averaged over 5 yards per carry the last 3 years. That's unusual. They usually average over 5 a carry. And he felt that was because teams are able to stack the box on them. Well, this year, bringing in a Tanner Mordecai from SMU, bringing in more of an air raid offense, teams are going to have to free up that box. And he feels Braylon Allen, Chez Meluzzi will have more productive years, higher YPCs, make the offense more explosive. Also, last year was an inexperienced team. Number 107 on my experience chart. Look at the defense. Last year, they only had 3 starters back. This year, they have 8 starters back. And then when you look at the schedule, the road games are against Washington State, Purdue, Illinois, Indiana, and Minnesota, all winnable. Their toughest 2 opponents are Iowa and Ohio State, and they get both those teams at home, and they catch Ohio State the week after playing Penn State. So adding it all up, I actually have Wisconsin, my number 1 surprise team in the country this year, or a non-top 10 team that I think has a chance of making the playoff. And talent-wise, Iowa is right there. In fact, Iowa may have a little bit more talent than Wisconsin this year. I like Cade McNamara coming in at QB. In fact, when Cade McNamara hit the portal, within 5 seconds, I said to myself, go to Iowa, and here he is. He's a perfect game manager, high percentage quarterback, doesn't make mistakes. He brings his tight end Eric All with him. And remember, the McNamara to All combo for Michigan won the Penn State game on the road 2 years ago. They've got a deep backfield with Caleb Johnson and LaShawn Williams. The last 2 years, when I talked to Coach Ferentz, he's been concerned with the offensive line. This year, he likes the offensive line. Finally, an experienced bunch. Defense, Phil Parker's got 8 starters to work with. Is there any doubt they'll have one of the top defenses in the country? And special teams, I rate them number 2 in the country. The only reason I didn't pick them winning the West this year is they have to play both Penn State and Wisconsin on the road. But Iowa's a very talented team.
Let's move over to the East. As it's weird, Phil. We actually have more than 2 Rutgers fans that listen in. So gotta give Rutgers some love. Coach Schiano, he's trying to right the ship. And last year's magazine, I remember you writing about Rutgers that it's going to take some time, but they're laying the foundation, and it's just going to take some time, but it's starting to get there. And we see with their defense is stout. They have a Big Ten defense. Offensively, really struggle to get that quarterback position ironed out. Evan Simon, Gavin Wimsatt, it's a lot of hope and prayer. And, it's a tough road to hoe for Rutgers. What are your thoughts on Rutgers going into this season? And you still maintain that foundation's being laid, and we're just a couple seasons off from them returning to bowls?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, if Rutgers gets off to a good start this year, and I can paint a picture where they open up 5-2, then they're just 1 win away from getting to a bowl game this year. I think Schiano's doing a great job. And what you said, Stu, Big Ten caliber defense. I remember my first conversation with Coach Schiano in his first year. We went over each of the units, and when we got to the running backs, he said, this is a Big Ten caliber unit. He didn't say that about any of the other units on the team. So, he was concerned with the way that the team had been recruited, the talent that they had. Now you could see the talent developing. You hit it right on the head with the defense. In fact, all 3 units on defense rank in my top units in the front of the magazine. Defensive line, linebackers, DBs. The special teams also rank up there, and that's where you want to be strong. Now, offense has been the problem. I think with Gavin Wimsatt, they've got the potential. I mean, if he can be accurate and make the right decisions throwing the football, they've got a talented quarterback there. Remember, he enrolled early, left high school early, so I think he's going to have one of the most improved seasons out there of any of the quarterbacks around. They've got the running backs. It's, once again, the deepest room on the team. The offensive line, is a work in progress, but it's better than it's been. It's still not quite there. And the receiver is probably the biggest question mark. It's the least experienced unit on the team. They need somebody to break through, like maybe Nassim Brantley from Western Illinois. And, interesting, you'll find this interesting, Stu, since you're a student of the game. When I started talking to the head coaches this year, and I talked to 123 of the 133 head coaches, after about 5, I had noticed, I send them over my team sheets with all the players on them, and then we go over every player. The calls usually take about an hour. But I noticed that these FCS transfers were starting from last year and being productive. And I started asking, and after about 15, the coaches would say, well, the reason for it is they have the experience. Maybe they were under-recruited out of high school, but now that they have the experience, they come with the chip on their shoulder, they're happy to be there, and they couldn't be more thrilled with them. And then as we went on and on, it seemed like every FCS transfer that came in last year did well. So keep your eyes on Nassim Brantley, a wide receiver.
I like that. And I agree. I mean, he was one of the lone bright spots in that Western Illinois offense. Again, we're sick. Penn State, Ohio State, and the war criminals in Ann Arbor. Did they set fire to Maui? Who knows? Some people are saying that, Phil, on Twitter. It's horrible. Yeah, it's really tough. It is really tough. I have to give the edge to the Wolverines in terms of most likely winner, but everybody and their brother is talking about Penn State. It seems like they are the wise guy pick this year to win the West, to upset the apple cart. Certainly schedule looks like it plays a little bit into it. What are your thoughts on Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, and how that's going to shake out?
Yeah, and all 3 teams are very close. In fact, Stu, in the magazine, I've got 2 different sets of ratings in the front. One is my power poll, which rates the overall talent of the team, and the other is my actual top 40, where I forecast where they're going to finish this year. Ironically, I've got Ohio State, the number 2 most talented team in the country, Michigan 3, and Penn State 5. So they're all right there. For Penn State's case, going over the team with Coach Franklin, I can tell you that their defense is basically 3 deep across the board. They've got their best offensive line they've had in a long time. If Drew Aller steps in, he's got Singleton and Allen at running back, Lambert Smith and Cephas at wide receiver, Theo Johnson at tight end. They're a dangerous team. They just have to break through against Ohio State and Michigan. I've had a lot of close games throughout the years, but usually come up short. If they can break through and snag one, they got a chance of winning the Big Ten this year. With Ohio State, very talented team, number 2 in the country talent-wise. I think Kyle McCord might be a Heisman contender at the end of the year. He's throwing my number 1 receiving core in the country, an improved running back core. Remember, both Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams were banged up last year. Offensive tackle's a question mark. Secondary's a question mark. And is the schedule. The schedule is my biggest question. They have to play Notre Dame on the road. They play Wisconsin on the road the week after they play Penn State. And, of course, they play Michigan in the Big House. And then I went with Michigan winning the East. I feel it's Jim Harbaugh's best team that he's put on the field in his 9 years there. You look at the offensive line, they've won the Joe Moore Award the last 2 years. They're my number 2 rated offensive line. Of most of the main contenders, they're one of the few that actually has a returning starter at quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. They got my number 1 set of running backs in the country. Defensively, all 3 units rank in my top 10, and the special teams are good. And then they've got the best schedule of the 3. Yes, they have to play Penn State on the road, but they won that game 2 years ago in Happy Valley. They get Ohio State at home, and the other road games are all very winnable. A very manageable schedule, which I rate number 67. Remember, I said Minnesota's playing the 7th toughest. Michigan's number 67. And that's why I picked Michigan to win the Big Ten this year.
I wanted to ask you, as we're wrapping up here, can you make a case for, outside of the obvious ones, you talked Iowa, Wisconsin, and then the 3 we just mentioned, is there a case to be made from another team in terms of potentially upsetting the apple cart and getting into that top 5, that pretty clear top 5 of the Big Ten? And is there a team that you think potentially, is going to be hanging out with Indiana, Purdue, and Northwestern towards the bottom?
Yeah, I think Michigan State may struggle this year. They're only
how
number
dare
94.
you, Phil? This is assault.
Sorry. They're number 94 on my experience chart. They've got some toss-up games. They're going to have to beat Maryland early. They got to beat Rutgers on the road. If they do that, it'll be a better than expected season. But they're a team that you said could, and that's why I threw out the could factor. As far as getting in the top 5, I don't really see one that gets there, but I would throw out Illinois as that potential. Illinois surprised me last year. In fact, I didn't expect much out of them, and I thought after that Nebraska game they were the best team in the Big Ten West. If Bielema gets the same type of performance this year, despite losing some talented ones, they could very well earn themselves into contention there. Sorry about that, Stu.
I could see it with Illinois. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Michigan State, we did a long expose on them, and you'll find out what they are against Washington. You got to have a better performance than losing by essentially 20.
A lot of folks will pick Maryland because of the skill players. I mean, with Talia Tagovailoa, some talented receivers, some talented running backs. But my question marks with Maryland's at the line of scrimmage, and that's not a good place to have question marks. I think Loxley's doing a good job recruiting. He's brought in a lot of guys, but they basically lose all 4 starters off the defensive line. They lose 4 starters off the offensive line. They brought in a lot of transfers. They're going to need immediate help there. But I think Maryland would be the trendy pick to get there because when the average fan looks at teams, they look at quarterback, running back, receivers. I focus a little bit more on the line play.
Yeah, I agree with you. That'll tell you everything you need to know. Phil, once again, let's hit the good people. Where can they go if they don't have a Barnes and Noble next to them, a Books A Million? Where can they get your information, your book, and some of the great stuff you're doing throughout the season?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Stu. Now, unlike past years, the magazine is only available at Barnes and Noble and Books A Million. As far
I got it right. Yes, I got it right.
Yeah, you hit it. Yeah, you hit it right, Stu. You were right there. It's only available at Barnes and Noble and Books A Million this year if you're looking for a brick and mortar store. So don't go driving around looking for it. Barnes and Noble, Books A Million. Now, if you don't go to those locations, you can go to my website, which is Phil Steele, STEELE.com. When you go there, I'm going to charge you a shipping charge. I mean, it costs to mail things. However, when you get the hard copy, I'm going to give you the digital version for free. And the digital version's updated all the way through September. So that's philsteele.com. And then as Stu mentioned, the FCS magazine. I cannot say enough. We have poured the labor into the FCS magazine. You can become an instant expert on the FCS. And I think there's something like 120, 130 games between FBS and FCS. And of course, Offshore and Vegas are putting numbers on FCS versus FCS games. We even give you the lines the last 5 years on all FCS games. Become an instant expert by getting the FCS magazine at philsteele.com. And then during the season, I have a weekly newsletter called Inside the Press Box, where I give you not only my picks every single week on every game, but also my computer's picks on every single game. I think you'll find it very interesting and very profitable if you'd sign up to that for the year.
Bill, I can't thank you enough. Let's say we do this next August sometime and get it cracking again. Always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you to Phil Steele. Check out philsteele.com. And until next time, we will see you after a while.